Mr. Akerman, great to see you here. Thanks for joining now that we have a verdict. Has this whole argument about the weaponization of the Justice Department been put to bed?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's pretty obvious if the Department of Justice is going after the president's son, that you can't very well say the Department of Justice is weaponized, not to mention the fact that you also have the prosecution of Senator Menendez that's going on in the Southern District of New York, a Democratic senator from New Jersey. So I think it's pretty obvious that the Department of Justice is an equal opportunity prosecutor, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or anything else. If you commit a crime, you're going to pay for it.
What's your take on this case? We spent so much time talking about Donald Trump's legal journey. I'm not sure you've spoken to the veracity of this case or what many people say in the legal community is the unusual nature of this case. For someone to be brought down on felony charges like this in a case that involves addiction. How do you see it, Nick Akerman?
It's pretty unusual. And so unusual, I don't know why they even bothered to go to trial in a sense, because either they should have made a deal or he should have just eaten the indictment and pled to all 3 counts before the trial started. They had to have known right from the get-go that there were these text messages during the period of time when he signed that form and filled in those boxes and also possessed the gun, even though it was for a short period of time. They knew that there was evidence that Hunter Biden was still addicted and was still taking crack cocaine. So I don't understand for a second why they even bothered to go to trial on this thing, because if he had just pled guilty and decided right from the beginning he was going to eat the indictment, all 3 counts, he would have at least under the federal sentencing guidelines gotten 2 points for basically admitting his guilt, which is a big item. And so I think all of this augurs for the other case in California. I just think he has to plead guilty to that as well. He's got to make a deal or plead guilty. The amount of time he's going to get is not going to be significant, if at all. And there's just no point in going through with this.
So Nick Akerman says plead guilty in the tax evasion. That's $1 million in taxes he allegedly did not pay. Nick, what kind of a sentence would he be in for if he played along like that?
Well, again, $1 million, yes, but he's already paid back the taxes. He's paid back, I believe, all the penalties. He's already made his amends with the IRS. Normally, under circumstances like that, where somebody's addicted, there is a good shot that the person wouldn't even be prosecuted in the first instance. So to me, as a criminal defense lawyer, as well as having been a prosecutor, I think you just have to go in, take your lumps, and argue that this is a case for probation. I mean, I think that is the approach he should be taking at this point, and should have taken before.
We saw a statement. Well, and of course, there was a plea deal at one point in this case, and I want to ask you about the statement from the president of the United States. He's already said he will not pardon Hunter Biden. He says, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Will there be an appeal? What's their case going to be?
I think there is going to be an appeal based on the Second Amendment. It's hard to believe that that's going to go very far or it's going to be successful. But I suppose he's got nothing to lose by doing that. Even after he's sentenced, an appeal will go before the circuit court and then possibly the Supreme Court. I just find it hard to believe that an appellate court is going to say that this statute is some way violative of the Second Amendment.
Fascinating. We're spending time with Nick Akerman, as he just said, a criminal defense attorney, but also noted former Watergate prosecutor. As we consider the last 24 hours in which Donald Trump sat down for his first interview with a probation officer, that's not getting any conversation today, Nick, because this Hunter Biden news just broke. But I wonder your thought on the way this was handled. He was allowed to do this virtually, and he was allowed to have his lawyer in the room, which we understand is not typical for most defendants in a criminal case like this. Should he have been afforded those exceptions?
Well, first of all, I think the interview by Zoom is not necessarily a big exception. Since the pandemic, I know that there are others who have also had that ability to be able to be interviewed by probation over Zoom. So I don't see that being a big deal. The fact that his lawyer was there, normally in the federal system, the lawyer is present for those kinds of conversations. So I don't, I know the judge allowed this exception based on the request by the attorneys. I don't see this being a big deal. Um, and look, he's being treated just like anybody else. He's being interviewed by probation. The big issue, I suppose, with probation is going to be whether he essentially evinces any kind of remorse for what he did, which it's hard to believe he would based on the statements he's been making since the conviction. So I don't see how this interview is going to help him anyway. If anything, I think it's going to be a big negative that's going to be given to the judge for sentencing purposes.
How about that? We say, I ask you this because there was a statement from a group of public defender groups, including the Legal Aid Society, the Bronx Defenders, and said these exceptions made for Trump are not typically afforded to low-income defendants. I think the idea here is if I had a public defender, they would not be allowed to join me in that room. Whether that moves the needle for you at all, Nick, where are you on potential sentencing? Because to your point, that's where this interview is heading.
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, I saw that statement, and like, I don't think materially it makes a difference that Trump did it by Zoom or that he had his lawyer present. I think the real question comes down to just what you just asked: what is the sentence going to be? And I would be surprised if he does not get some jail time, mainly because Michael Cohen, the witnesses who testified against him, served 3 years as a result of this crime in part. Also, Alan Weisselberg, who was one of the architects of setting up this false document scheme with Trump's approval, has already is going to be at the end of the day have served 6 months at Rikers Island for other offenses. So I think it's going to be hard for the judge to justify why those two people serve time and Donald Trump is not. So I think that's his big problem here.
Wow.
Is that there are others that were as culpable more and less culpable than him that were involved in this that have spent some time in jail.